The scream shattered the night like glass, sharp and raw, cutting through the silence of the small suburban house. Daniel jolted awake, his breath ragged, chest tight with dread. His eyes darted toward the closet door across the room, its wooden frame casting long shadows under the flickering glow of the streetlight leaking through thin curtains. His heart pounded as he whispered to himself that it was just a dream, but deep inside he knew he hadn't been dreaming at all. The air was heavy, thick with something unseen, pressing down on him as though the room itself wanted him to suffocate. He tried to steady his breathing, but the whisper came, soft, cruel, sliding from the dark crack beneath the closet door. "Daniel!" The sound wasn't loud, yet it filled every corner, vibrating inside his skull. He froze, gripping his blanket, sweat trickling down his temples. His throat tightened as he whispered back to the emptiness, begging it to stop, but the closet seemed to lean toward him, waiting, breathing, alive. Daniel gasped as silence returned, broken only by the ticking of a clock on his nightstand. He forced himself to move, swinging his legs off the bed, the floorboards groaning beneath his weight. The whisper had stopped, yet the dread lingered, thicker than ever. He rubbed his face, muttering that he was imagining things, but even his own voice trembled with disbelief. His eyes kept dragging back to the closet, its wooden door a silent sentinel daring him to come closer. A childhood memory clawed its way into his mind, a night long ago when he swore he had seen something in that same dark corner, something waiting. He tried to shake it away, but the image wouldn't leave. He whispered into the empty air, begging himself to forget, to move on, but the quiet pressed harder as if listening. The floor groaned again as Daniel stood, his bare feet pressing into the chilled boards. Each step toward the nightstand felt heavier, as though the house itself resisted his movements. He reached for the lamp, but his fingers froze above the switch, a sharp awareness crawling down his spine. Something behind him shifted. He didn't turn immediately, clinging to the hope that it was his imagination, but the silence was pierced by a soft scrape, wood against wood. His breath caught, heart hammering in his throat. He whispered that it couldn't be real, but even as he said it, he felt the weight of unseen eyes fixed on his back. Daniel forced himself to turn, eyes snapping toward the closet. The door had shifted, only an inch, but that inch was enough. A sliver of blackness cut through the room, darker than the night itself, darker than shadow. His knees weakened, a tremor running up his legs. He whispered a plea to no one, words breaking on his tongue, but the silence swallowed them whole. The closet seemed alive now, the wood bending inward as if it breathed. He staggered back toward the bed, gripping the nightstand for balance, each heartbeat thundering in his ears like drum beats of doom. The whisper returned, soft, almost tender, curling through the air like smoke. "Daniel." His name stretched unnaturally, low and drawn out, vibrating against his chest. He stumbled backward, pressing against the bed frame, too afraid to blink. The voice was closer this time, crawling from the crack in the door, reaching out with invisible fingers. He squeezed his eyes shut, whispering that it wasn't real, but when he opened them again, the closet door was wider still. Cold air spilled into the room, carrying the faint scent of earth and rot. Daniel's throat tightened as he realized the truth. Something inside the closet was waiting for him, calling to him, and it would not stop. Daniel lay frozen, until dawn's pale light began to seep through the curtains. Sleep never returned, only the suffocating weight of unease. He rose slowly, moving through the quiet house as though trespassing in his own home. Every creak of the floorboard echoed louder than it should, reminding him of the whispers that still lingered in his head. He whispered reassurances to himself, clinging to logic, but every shadow stretched unnaturally, every corner seemed deeper. His reflection in the hallway mirror startled him, his eyes hollow, skin damp and pale. He stepped back, heart racing, convinced he had seen movement behind him in the glass. Turning quickly, he found nothing, only the empty living room beyond. But the silence pressed in again, and he knew the night's terror had not ended. It had only begun. Daniel stepped into the kitchen, seeking comfort in the simple ritual of brewing coffee. The hum of the machine filled the silence, but it felt foreign, distant. His hand trembled as he poured the water, spilling drops onto the counter. He muttered that it was just nerves, but his voice cracked mid-sentence. From behind, a soft sound stirred, a faint shuffle across the linoleum floor. He spun around, but nothing was there, only the dim kitchen, chairs neatly tucked under the table. He exhaled shakily, clutching the counter for balance. Yet even as he turned back to the machine, he caught it again, a whisper-like breath brushing against his ear, too close, too intimate. His body stiffened, eyes darting toward the darkened hallway, where shadows seemed to twist and linger. He grabbed his mug, hoping the bitter taste would ground him. Steam curled upward, but in it he swore he saw shapes forming, curling like faces, screaming in silence. He blinked hard, shaking his head, but when he looked again, the steam twisted still, reaching toward him. He stepped back, spilling coffee across the counter, muttering in panic. A sudden knock at the window shattered the moment, his heart leaping to his throat. He rushed forward, pulling the curtain aside, only to find nothing beyond but the pale morning street, still and empty. Yet, as his breath slowed, his eyes fell to the glass. A faint handprint, smeared across the outside, marked the window. His chest constricted as he whispered, it couldn't be real, but deep inside, he knew it was a warning. Daniel backed away from the window, pulse hammering. He stumbled into the living room, desperate for distraction. The television flickered to life as he pressed the remote, static hissing across the screen. He tapped buttons frantically, muttering curses, but the static deepened, filling the room with a low, rumbling drone. Shapes flickered in the distortion, figures moving in shadow, twisting unnaturally. He froze, eyes wide, transfixed by the nightmare leaking from the screen. Then the sound cut abruptly, leaving only silence, heavy and absolute. Daniel stood in the dim room, breathing hard, the echo of whispers still etched inside his ears. The television clicked off on its own, the remote falling useless in his hand. The silence after the static was unbearable, every breath he took echoing back at him. Daniel whispered that he wasn't alone, though no one was there to answer. His skin prickled as a cold breeze swept through the living room, though no windows were open. Papers on the coffee table rustled, lifting into the air as though stirred by unseen hands. He stumbled backward, bumping into the couch, his heart pounding. Then came the sound again, a low whisper, his name stretched into a hiss. Daniel. It seeped from the shadows, from the walls themselves, curling inside his chest. He screamed, clutching his head, tears welling in his eyes as he begged for it to stop. But the whisper only deepened, echoing from every corner, until the whole house seemed to chant his name. Daniel stumbled through the hallway, his breath shallow, still hearing whispers bleeding from the walls. He reached for his phone, desperate for connection, but the screen flickered violently before dying in his hands. Panic swelled in his chest as he muttered that he couldn't be trapped, not in his own home. A sudden chill brushed his neck, and he turned sharply, catching sight of a fleeting shadow darting toward the stairs. His legs locked, refusing to follow, though every nerve screamed for him to move. Slowly he forced his steps forward, each creak of the wood echoing like a scream in the silence. His hand traced the rail, slick with condensation, though the air was bone dry. His body trembled as he whispered that something inside the house was alive. The stairs groaned as Daniel climbed, each step weighed down by dread. His throat was dry, and his hand shook as it clung to the railing. Halfway up, a sound cut through the silence, faint yet unmistakable. A child's laughter, hollow and distant. He froze, heart pounding, eyes darting upward to the landing where the sound echoed. His lips moved with words he didn't believe, insisting it was a trick of the mind. Yet the sound came again, louder now, carrying sorrow beneath its laughter. The hallway above was darker than it should have been, as though light refused to exist there. Daniel's chest tightened, every breath labored, as he forced his foot upward, the sound of the child's voice curling around his ears like a chain. He reached the landing, his body stiff with fear. The hallway stretched long, lined with closed doors, yet the child's voice now whispered his name, delicate and broken. His hands clenched into fists as he muttered desperate pleas for it to stop. "I." The doors seemed to breathe, wood expanding and contracting, groaning under invisible weight. He stepped forward, his reflection catching faintly in a dusty picture frame on the wall. For a moment his reflection didn't mimic him. It lingered, smiling faintly, before vanishing into the glass. Daniel staggered back, whispering that he was losing his mind. Yet the chill of the house, the whispers, and the shifting shadows told him he wasn't imagining anything. Something in this place wanted him broken. Daniel pressed his back against the wall, fighting to steady his breath. His fingers brushed against the old wallpaper, peeling and damp, as if rotting from within. A sudden knock rattled one of the doors down the hall, deep and violent, shattering the silence. He jumped, heart slamming in his chest, whispering that no one else could be here. The knock came again, louder, then all at once every door along the hall shook violently, hinges groaning. Daniel clutched his head, teeth clenched, terror crushing his chest. The whispers rose louder, a chorus of voices chanting his name. He stumbled forward, desperate to escape. But the hallway stretched endlessly, bending and twisting as though it would never let him go. The voices cut off suddenly, leaving crushing silence. Daniel froze mid-step, trembling. Slowly, one door creaked open at the end of the hall, the sound stretched and agonizing. Darkness spilled from inside, thick and suffocating, swallowing the dim moonlight. He whispered he couldn't go closer, yet his body betrayed him, feet dragging forward without control. His hands reached out, trembling violently, as if pulled by invisible strings. The stench of earth and decay wafted from the open doorway, coating his lungs. He whispered prayers, voice breaking, but the darkness grew denser with each step. His foot crossed the threshold, and the whispers returned, not from the room, but from inside him, curling within his chest like a second heartbeat. Daniel stood frozen in the darkness, his breath ragged, when a sudden knock rattled the front door downstairs. The sound cut through the suffocating silence, pulling him back from the brink of collapse. His legs shook as he descended the stairs, each step dragging as though chains pulled against him. Reaching the door, he hesitated, hand hovering over the knob, whispering questions to himself. Who could possibly be here at this hour? Another knock came, steady and insistent. His chest tightened as he forced himself to pull it open. Standing in the pale light was a figure cloaked in shadows, tall and lean, eyes dark and unreadable. The stranger's voice was low and firm, warning that Daniel should not ignore the whispers, for they would never stop. Daniel stepped back, his voice shaking as he demanded to know who the stranger was. The man entered without waiting, his boots echoing across the floor. The air grew colder, as though the house recoiled from his presence. Daniel's stomach churned, torn between slamming the door shut and begging for help. The stranger's expression remained grim, his voice calm but heavy with certainty. He explained that the house carried a curse, a wound that fed on fear. Daniel whispered that he didn't believe him, but even as the words left his mouth, the whispers returned, circling the room like vultures. The stranger's dark eyes fixed on him, reminding him that disbelief would not save him. The stranger moved across the room with unsettling certainty, as though he had walked these halls before. His gaze lingered on the walls, tracing the cracks as if they concealed buried truths. Daniel's voice cracked as he demanded answers, desperate for reason. The man finally stopped, turning sharply, and whispered that something in this house had been waiting long before Daniel was born. He spoke of others before him, people broken and consumed by the same whispers. Daniel's face tightened, shaking his head, unwilling to accept the word. The man's tone sharpened, reminding him that denial had already claimed lives, and the house would claim his if he did not confront what was hidden. Daniel's legs buckled as he collapsed into a chair, his hands covering his face. His words came as broken whispers, confessing that the voices called his name, that they seeped into his dreams. The stranger remained silent for a long moment before leaning closer, his voice low, and edged with urgency. He told Daniel the voices would never stop. They were bound to him, entwined with the past he had tried to forget. Daniel looked up, trembling, asking what he meant, but the man's eyes only darkened. He warned that family secrets ran deeper than Daniel realized, that the shadows were not only after him but after blood. The words cut through him, leaving him paralyzed. The stranger straightened, his presence filling the room with unbearable weight. He warned Daniel that he had little time. Whatever haunted him would grow stronger with each night. Daniel whispered that he wanted to leave, but the man's voice cut sharp, insisting escape was impossible. The house had claimed him, bound by something older than walls or wood. Daniel's chest heaved as he begged for answers, but the man only gave a cryptic reply. If Daniel wanted to survive, he must open the door he feared most and face what waited inside. Silence followed, heavy and absolute, leaving Daniel trembling as the stranger's words echoed like a prophecy of doom. Daniel sat motionless long after the stranger's words faded into silence. The house groaned as though it had overheard every secret, pressing the weight of truth against his chest. He whispered to himself that he could leave, but the words fell flat, hollow. The stranger had vanished as suddenly as he arrived, leaving only his warning behind, echoing like a curse. Daniel rose shakily, drawn toward the stairs once more. His body resisted, but his legs carried him upward, pulled by something beyond will. The whispers returned, sharper, less like voices and more like claws dragging inside his skull. His name stretched again, but this time layered, spoken by many at once, each tone steeped in malice. At the top of the stairs Daniel paused, trembling as he stared at the half-open door from before. Cold air seeped out, raising goosebumps across his arms. He whispered that he couldn't do it, his breath shaking in the thick silence. Yet, the house answered with another sound, the sharp creak of hinges moving by themselves. The door swung wider, darkness spilling out like a tide, swallowing the faint light. Daniel's chest tightened as his body pressed backward, but an unseen force seemed to push him forward. He gasped, clutching the wall, tears threatening as he realized he was being guided, herded toward the room that reeked of earth and decay. He stepped inside, breath ragged, the floor groaning beneath his weight. The room was bare, walls cracked and rotting, though Daniel felt it was alive. His eyes darted toward the closet in the corner, its door slightly open. His knees weakened, remembering the whispers that bled from it nights before. He whispered prayers under his breath, begging for strength, but the whispers only grew louder inside the room, swelling into a chorus. The air turned foul, carrying the stench of soil and something dead. Daniel's stomach twisted as the whispers sharpened into words he could almost understand, telling him he was never meant to escape. Daniel staggered backward, his shoulders slamming against the wall as the closet door creaked wider. The blackness inside pulsed like a living thing, expanding and contracting as though it breathed. His name hissed from within, layered with voices, some male, some female, all twisted. He clutched his head, pressing his palms to his ears, but the voices drilled deeper, vibrating in his chest. The floor beneath him shuddered, dust raining from the ceiling. His lips moved desperately, repeating he wasn't meant for this, that it couldn't be real, but the whispers only laughed, cruel and unrelenting. The closet's shadows stretched farther, curling toward him like claws eager to claim him. Then, in the midst of his terror, a flicker of something different appeared. The shadows thinned briefly, and in their place, a figure emerged within the closet's darkness, a faint, ghostly outline of a woman. Her form glowed dimly, her face contorted between sorrow and rage. Daniel's heart thudded painfully as he whispered, asking who she was. The figure's mouth moved, but no words escaped, only more whispers filling the room. He fell to his knees, his eyes locked on hers, sensing that she was both victim and tormentor. Tears blurred his vision as he begged her to stop, but she only raised a hand, pointing directly at him before vanishing back into the black. The whispers erupted louder, consuming everything. Daniel collapsed against the floor, chest heaving, as the last of the ghostly figure dissolved into blackness. The whispers did not fade. Instead they sharpened, shaping into voices that sounded human, mocking, cruel. He clutched the floorboards, nails scraping wood, whispering that he couldn't fight this. The closet pulsed again, opening wider, and from within emerged something darker than shadow itself. The blackness pooled, stretching upward into a shape. Long limbs, distorted features, a form that wasn't human yet wore fragments of a face. Daniel's stomach lurched as he recognized it. His own. Timed out. The figure stepped forward, movements jerky yet deliberate, every joint cracking like breaking bones. Daniel gasped, backing away on all fours, eyes wide in horror. The whispers surged louder, overlapping until they became unbearable. The figure leaned forward, its distorted mouth stretching unnaturally. It whispered Daniel's name, each syllable drawn out like a curse. Daniel screamed, shaking his head violently, begging it to stop. The entity's form flickered, revealing glimpses of other faces within its shifting body. Men, women, children, all trapped, all broken. Their mouths opened soundlessly, screaming from within the blackness. Daniel's heart pounded as he realized he wasn't just seeing them. He was being shown what awaited him. Daniel's hands shook violently as he grabbed a fallen chair and hurled it toward the figure. The wood shattered against its form, splintering into pieces, but the entity didn't flinch. Instead, it laughed. A low, hollow sound that reverberated in his skull. Daniel's breath broke into sobs as he shouted that it couldn't be real, but the figure's voice grew louder, mocking his denial. The whispers shifted again, now echoing in his own voice, every word dripping with venom. He stumbled, clutching his ears, screaming at himself to stop, but the sound grew stronger. The entity advanced every step, shaking the floor, the air thick with suffocating dread. The walls of the room warped, bending inward as if collapsing into the closet's black maw. Daniel staggered to his feet, chest heaving, tears streaming down his cheeks. He shouted that he wouldn't give in, though his voice broke with fear. The entity paused, its head twitching unnaturally, tilting as though mocking his defiance. For a fleeting moment, silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Then the floor split open beneath Daniel's feet, the boards snapping apart, as darkness poured upward like smoke. He stumbled backward, gripping the doorframe, but the entity lunged, closing the distance in a blur of shifting limbs and hollow faces. Daniel screamed as the entity's shadow engulfed him, cold, seeping into his bones. His vision blurred, darkness clawing across his eyes, pulling him toward the closet's depths. He thrashed, nails tearing against wood, shouting that he would not be taken. For a moment, his hand brushed the edge of reality, the frame of the door, the chance of escape. But the voices swelled inside his head, breaking him down. His own voice joined them, whispering, mocking, betraying him. The entity's face twisted fully into his, smiling wide with unnatural malice. Daniel's scream cut short, swallowed into silence as the room collapsed into shadow. Darkness swallowed everything. Daniel opened his eyes to find himself standing in a space that wasn't real. An endless void of shifting shadows. The air was thick, humming with whispers that circled endlessly. He whispered that he was dreaming, but the pain in his chest told him otherwise. Shapes moved around him, faces half-formed, limbs broken and twisting. They were the trapped souls, their eyes hollow yet filled with rage. Daniel's throat tightened as they turned toward him, their mouths opening in unison, though no sound emerged. The silence was worse than any scream. He stepped back, trembling, but the shadows surged closer, closing in as if he belonged among them. Daniel screamed that he wasn't like them, but his voice shattered uselessly in the void. The shadow figures drew nearer, their bodies writhing, merging into one mass. Their eyes glowed faintly, reflecting fragments of his own fear. He turned and ran, feet pounding against nothing, the ground forming beneath him with each step, only to collapse again. The whispers chased him, growing louder, overlapping until they were deafening. He stumbled, falling hard onto unseen ground, gasping for breath. When he looked up, the entity was there again, towering over him, its smile widening. Its voice bled into him, whispering that resistance was finished. The entity reached down, its hand stretching unnaturally long, fingers claw-like, curling toward his chest. Daniel's body convulsed, his scream tearing from his throat. He felt the air leave his lungs, the warmth drain from his body. Memories flickered in his mind, childhood laughter, fleeting joy, moments of love crushed beneath the entity's weight. His eyes filled with tears as he realized the truth. It wasn't only after his life. It was after his soul. Summoning everything he had left, Daniel shouted that he refused, that he wouldn't belong to it. His voice broke, but for a heartbeat, the void shook with his defiance. The void fractured, cracks of faint light slicing through the black. The entity shrieked, its form splitting into shifting fragments. Daniel gasped, clutching his chest, his body glowing faintly as though resisting its grip. The shadow figures around him wailed soundlessly, recoiling from the light. But the entity wasn't done. It lunged, desperate to consume him before he broke free. Daniel staggered, standing tall despite trembling legs, his eyes locked on the spreading cracks of light. He whispered one final plea, not to the entity but to himself, that he would not surrender. His body leaned forward, forcing himself into the light even as the entity clawed for him. The light consumed everything in a blinding flash. When it faded, Daniel lay on his bedroom floor, gasping, drenched in sweat. The closet door was shut, silent, nothing stirring within. His hands trembled as he whispered he was free, though his voice quivered with disbelief. The house was quiet, but the silence carried weight, as if listening. He staggered to his feet, forcing himself toward the window, desperate for the morning sun. As he pulled back the curtain, a chill ran through him. In the reflection of the glass behind his shoulder, a faint shadow lingered, smiling.